The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Host the ultimate backyard barbecue with Whole Foods Market. It's the Hot Grill Summer event through July 16th with sizzling sales on no antibiotics ever boneless beef ribeye steak and beef New York strip steak. Plus, check out sales on sustainable wild-caught Alaska sockeye salmon, organic strawberries, and more. In a hurry? Choose grab-and-go favorites like picnic salads and sushi, plus plenty of cooler-friendly beverages. Make it a hot grill summer at Whole Foods Market.
Oh my God, can somebody send him a copy of Dirty Dancing and say, nobody puts Māori in the corner.
Tēnā koutou katoa, this is Commemorations time on Wednesday, the 7th of February. I'm here today with Annabelle Lee-Mather, kia ora, Ben Thomas, kia ora. Kia Butler is making the magic happen. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Are you coming to our live show? Are you doing that?
Yeah, I wouldn't miss it.
Since I mention it, that's just spontaneously, that's on February the 15th. There aren't very many tickets left, I checked. So if you would like to come to see Gone by Lunchtime live.
Are we going to comp T.I. here?
Yeah, well, I think he might.
No, he's like our band manager.
I assume he'll be, doing the effects and stuff.
Yeah, I've got a block of about 9 seats booked out for just me in the middle of the seating block.
Your entourage.
Me and my mates, these cameras in the studio.
Cameras?
Yeah, so I can film you guys while you're...
Did we sign anything about cameras? I don't know.
Oh, you'll need to talk to my agent about that, T.I. here.
Annabelle's people might have something to say about that. Today we're going to talk a bit about Waitangi and what happened there, and then we'll talk a bit about the Casey Costello business and about the green leadership. Let's start in Waitangi. You were there, Annabelle.
I was.
Tell me about it. It looked pretty amazing.
It was amazing. A massive turnout. A very positive overall vibe, despite the obviously controversial lead up that had prompted people to come. I think Ngā Puhi did an incredible job of hosting and, managing what was shaping up to be a really tense Waitangi. And when you look at things that have happened at Waitangi in the past, I mean, Stephen Joyce always being a standout example for me, I think that it was really, really well managed by both the Ngā Puhi and the people who attended. Obviously, there was some strong emotions, but, nothing got physical or violent or over the top. So I thought it was a really great, wonderful event.
This year they staggered out the welcomes, so the opposition had their own pōwhiri, and then there was a kingitanga one that Te Pāti Māori went along to, and then on the 5th, which is the traditional day, it was the parties of government that attended. And as you say, the protest the protest took the form of a wero and waiata over some speeches, which in the scheme of things seems pretty healthy way of expressing different opinions. It was interesting to watch. Winston Peters spoke and said, "I've got places to be. I've got more important people to talk to." Was very brief, and then said, "Who's saying that we want to get rid of the treaty? We don't." And denounced hysteria and nonsense, and said, "Listen, sunshine, when you were knee high to a grasshopper, blah blah blah." That was quite Winston. David Seymour was quite more combative. He said. He took on, I think it was Penny Henare, who'd used some oratory involving spiders and so on. Was it spiders?
And guns.
It was, yeah.
Kelvin said
it was
Pākehā spiders are coming.
Was it Kelvin Davis? Yeah. And he said, not even Donald Trump would stoop to calling people insects. And I thought, I think he would. I think that is...
I feel like he's going to take that as a personal challenge.
And I also thought David Seymour, who fronted up, good on him, I think in terms of taking people on and use of imagery, the guy who used imagery to suggest blowing up the Ministry of Pacific Peoples perhaps isn't in the strongest position to talk. But David Seymour was right in that. Like he really did turn up. He really did engage it in the debate. Mm-hmm. He threw down lots of metaphorical grenades, and then it got a bit rowdy, and there were some warnings that the Prime Minister might not speak. And eventually he was brought up to the balcony. He delivered a speech. They pulled the string.
It did, and at one point too, because the crowd was starting to like jeer a bit, and the Haukainga got up and said, "Hey, this is our manuhiri. We have invited him here, and we want to hear what he's got to say." So they literally interjected to call for, silence.
And what he did have to say was the same speech.
Yeah, and then they started jeering up again. But I thought, I just think Apuhi did such a good job of hosting.
I think that's right. It seemed like, especially given the circumstances, I think it really hit that balance between sort of, a respectful kind of commemoration and, fiery political debate. Without the sort of, the nonsense of sort of, jostling and pushing and shoving at the lower marae and, things that we've seen in the past. I think...
It also didn't, I was
fantastic visuals from Great Showman.
Mad Chapman, who was there for the spin-off, the editor of the site, and she said, it wasn't as though there was this massive security presence or anything. Was that your
There
perception?
wasn't. There was like police here and stuff, but they were really low-key. And... honestly, I didn't see...
Do they have their water backpacks on?
They had like trackies on.
Yeah, like that.
And like
the crowd
a polo
is always full
shirt,
of
casual
undercovers.
vibes, and
sort of,
a
you're
bit
like,
of a pico and stuff.
just some single late 30s tourists who have come by themselves to Waitangi to
wide-shouldered chaps wearing casual polo shirts and caps
cargo
just
shorts
out from
sort of,
ordinary public holiday stuff. Yeah.
But the other reason I really admire how it was managed too is because, the pai in Te Ao Māori, the name or the metaphor that we use for the pai is te umu puka puka atu, the fiery ovens of tūmātauenga. That is the god of war's space. And if you're going to stand up there, be prepared to be cooked. And so you have to honour that tradition as well. You have to make it a genuine place of debate. You can't sanitise it so that it feels safe and comfy for your manuhiri who are coming. And, people have been calling for a debate, and that's a great place to do it. So I thought they struck the balance really well of making it accessible for all of the politicians who wanted to speak, while at the same time honouring the tradition that when you get up on the pai, it's a fiery place. It's not where you just sit there and sing kumbaya together. So I thought, again, they did a great job. E mihi ana kia rātou.
When Christopher Luxon went up, Ben, it was Luxon GPT. There was a lot of outcomes and mojo up there. And we talked about this in the last podcast. That very likely is the strategy, just not to make, you speak about the cauldron bells, but this is, he's just really not trying to be an exciting soup. It's very, don't frighten anybody, don't add any gunpowder to the mix.
He's going for marshmallow, not rotisserie chicken on te umu puka puka atu.
Just a quiet little, finish the night with a little marshmallow. Is that the plan, Ben? Honi Haruera was interesting before speaking ahead of Luxon. He said, "You've got two options, Mr. Prime Minister."
Soared to new heights of oratory as his honours want.
It's about flushing things down the toilet. But he also said quite right. He said, "You've got two options here, Mr. Prime Minister. You can either go out and say and denounce the treaty principles bill or the demands of your coalition partners, or you can just ignore them and pretend it's not there." And he very much went for the latter, didn't he? He didn't get into it. Was that the best option, do you think, Ben, or do you think that there was some way in which he might have taken the opportunity to make it clear in that environment, in that context, at Waitangi, that the Treaty Principles Bill, which is the main controversial core of all of this, is not going further.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's put a pin in that and say it's the main controversial thing for now. But
what do you mean by that? Do you think there's more controversial things to come?
Look, New Zealand First have already been trying to nudge that off stage and say, look at our own review of the Waitangi Tribunal. Forget about this Treaty Principles Bill; it's not going anywhere. Think about old Matua Shane reviewing the Waitangi Tribunal and getting into the principles of the the treaty clauses and legislation. So there is this kind of jostling on between the two coalition partners for national, for both of them to be seen to be delivering to their constituents, where there's a lot of overlap on treaty issues, that they're going to sort of, they're going to take action against what I think, did New Zealand First call it the Maorification of New Zealand or something? Or was that? No, Hobson's
That
Pledge.
sounds like
Casey
a Don
Costello sort of
Brash
stuff,
thing.
Yeah.
Well, they all come together eventually. Don't
Yeah,
they?
so once the Treaty
embrace.
Principles Bill is done, that's not the end of it, right? But that's the big issue for now, and that's the flashpoint, which I think ACT. If you wanted to congratulate them for that, I guess you would. You would congratulate them for getting that on the agenda after it seemed to have dropped off a bit in favour of New Zealand First's kind of, English first and whatever policies before the election, in terms of this head-to-head contest between the two coalition partners to see who's sort of, bashing Māori the most. Yeah, and in between that, this is the sort of, what is it, Charybdis Scylla that that Luxon is navigating his Air New Zealand plane between, the whirlpool and the sea monster or whatever, where he's got to try and sort of bring down the temperature with that caveat that he can't come out and directly say we're going to kill the bill. The Treaty Principles Bill.
He could get inches closer.
It's this asymptotic relationship where he's getting basically to within.
I think he said this morning. I
distance.
think he said, and I could be correct. I think he said, and it will not progress further. The language is getting, or it's. I get maybe it was more subtle than that, and the and not too progressive. It's very subtle, but he wants us to hear quite clearly. He wants the inference.
Yeah.
He is seeking the inference. Oh, that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, that's right. And because he couldn't give that concrete, absolute, what Hone Harawira was demanding, what a lot of people were demanding, I'm going to kill the bill. David Seymour, I'm going to rip the bill up in front of you when you bring it to me on the 9th floor. Because he couldn't say that at the speech yesterday, the strategy instead is, well, I think there were two possible and interlinked ones. First of all, you got a big audience. All of this is being recorded. All of this is being broadcast. You're talking to your major voters, your main voters, and you're sort of talking about the economy and your plan for growth and your plan for jobs and all that sort of stuff. And the second thing is, to just go back to those, those kind of key issues that he has in terms of the relationship with Māori, which is, frontline service provision, improving delivery of services by enlisting iwi and Māori service providers, and not kind of going beyond that remit, not kind of pushing the boat out. So, keeping to the core messages and staying boring.
Annabelle, do you think that works? Do you think that Christopher Luxon can allow for the two coalition partners, the two other heads of the three-headed taniwha, as someone put it, to take the heat while he just kind of sticks consistent? I mean, full marks for consistency, right? Like they're literally the same words, but that's not stupid. That's talking. Say the same thing, hold the line, and then emerge the other side.
Well, when Annette Sykes stood on the pai, her challenge to Luxon was, that basically Māori are wondering why we're just seeing the tail wag the dog, and we want to hear how the dog barks and how the dog moves, I think was the way she put it. I think the issue that Luxon has is obviously he can't completely diss the proposals that are being put forward by by Winston and Seymour. I get that. But the problem is that the subject matter that he chose to speak to at Waitangi also ran quite hollow. So one of the key themes of his speech was about truancy in education. And, we want to improve Māori truancy rates. You've got to get your kids to school kind of thing. And I think for people who understand truancy and the needs of Māori children in education, it rings very thin and hollow, like he hasn't done his homework before he came to Waitangi, because we know that truancy rates are related to access to food, health, housing, security of housing, all of those things. And those things were kind of not really addressed. So I think yes, he's trying to navigate, but you also need to look like you're boned up on what the real issues are. Otherwise, you give the impression of being kind of very fresh, very green, and not really able to participate meaningfully in that sort of forum. The fact that he wasn't able to pick up on some of the challenges that were laid down or weave in anybody. The thing with Luxon is he's a managerial prime minister. That's his background, right? He's a CEO dude. He's not a charismatic leader. And so forums like that really highlight that fact. So I don't think it will have a massive impact on Māori's opinion on him one way or another. I think the overall sort of perception is that the tail continues to wag the dog, and when the dog barks, doesn't bark very loud.
And I guess
the thing is, it's not so much the tail wagging the dog as with the Treaty Principles Bill, the dog has accidentally eaten a poisonous bug or something, and it's got to vomit it out over the next year or so, right?
But the tail put the bug in the mouth. I mean,
Was the bug on the tail?
The bug was on the tail.
Then
the tail flicked around and put the bug,
But it's, in this scenario, the review of treaty clauses from New Zealand First is sort of a mild case of ringworm, like the dog has some problems that it's
the dog's got two tails for a start, which is not normal.
That's hard.
Fine, it's fine, it's good. It's good to have two tails. Or tails.
But with Luxon's repeated speech, the thing is, who among us has not opened up the Word document for the previous press release or the previous speech or whatever and just being like, I'll just work off it, and I think he was both being on, he was both, I think everyone was correct, right? I think Luxon is right that the reason that was there is because he does want consistency of messaging. If you come up with a good formulation of, your kind of little patter about how New Zealand formed as a nation or whatever, or the background, you don't need to change it that much. You'll either leave it as a placeholder to just sort of say, oh, we'll do the same thing there, or you just leave it the same. But I think his critics are right that he probably didn't expect that people would notice it was exactly the same.
Right? I think there might be a speechwriter who's feeling,
exactly
a little bit jelly that they may have.
I think too that he actually has been really badly let down by his speechwriter, because all you'd have to say is, this time last year, I stood on this spot and I said A, B, C, D,
I think that's what
E, F,
Jacinda did a lot, didn't she?
And I'm here to
Block
say,
quote.
It's kind of sloppy.
Just need a proper citation on your own speech.
She said about things she had never said before. She'd be like, I've been perfectly clear.
But the other thing is, she did stand up there in the first year she was there as Prime Minister, if I recall correctly, and say, judge me on my action. She was, she was kind of almost the other end of the spectrum in terms of putting down the big rhetorical flourishes and also creating tests that she would be judged by in the future, and whether or not she passed them is up for debate.
But the interesting
Luxon
thing is
taking a different course and being...
They're taking two very different rhetorical stances. In practice, not actually that different, right? Which is that both of them are leaders who have, I think, a strong personal conviction that the treaty has to be honoured, that we need to lift up the prospects and the outcomes for Māori across the country. That's the most pressing issue in terms of our social indicators. Neither of them are particularly like intellectually rigorous in their understanding of the history or the actual meaning of the treaty. You know, I mean, I think Ardern the same day that she stood up and said, this is, let me be judged by my actions or whatever. Mikey Sherman asked her what the articles of the treaty were, and she didn't know. So
I think she stumbled on one of them. Yeah.
So both of them are very pragmatic politicians in this. Kiwa's the same as well. They're not treaty scholars. They're not going to engage with you on the Mātiki Mai report. They're not going. They will look at you blankly if you talk to them about the relational sphere. But they do want to, get better outcomes. It's just that Luxon is a lot more sort of, I was going to say straightforward in his language, but then I remembered him saying aerating the issues this morning. So it's a bit more prosaic.
Well, it's managerial. Annabelle's right. Like it is very that Luxon speak. The the number of times the outcomes. Just to finish it off, Annabelle, you were there. Came across the other day that it's 10 years since the Herald had its infamous protest-free edition on Waitangi Day. Do you remember that? Which had that symbol on the front page. It was like, we will have no protests in our newspaper today because we will look at Waitangi as this, nice day for a picnic.
That's
or whatever.
right, yeah.
And it did strike me that given all of that, and notwithstanding that many people quite understandably find some of the policies that are being put forward in the coalition agreement distasteful and threatening, it felt like looking from distance, like a healthy Waitangi, like it is embedded in our politics and in our culture as part of the calendar. And is that fair? Do you feel that way too?
I think so too, yeah. It's part of the DNA of our politics and, of course, of our nation, as it should be. And the fact that it is a day of protest and debate shouldn't be something that we're scared of. It should be something that we embrace.
And I think the message, to Luxon's credit, the message is getting through, right? I saw Hone Harawira was on RNZ this morning saying, Seymour's bill is dead. We've got the undertaking that we needed, because the hints and the nudges.
The Undertaker. Christopher Luxon is David Seymour's legislative undertaker.
And it seems that, and so the people who've been protesting, have been taken to the streets, social media, I think they will feel that they've gotten a result, whether it's materially different from what it would have been without that. But there has been, I think a lot of people have remarked on the sort of kotahitanga, the togetherness, which I think has been a really positive thing for Te Ao Māori, whatever the outcomes, in a short-term sense. So actually I think, it is kind of, flowering as something quite positive, in all respects.
And the thing too is it's not over because there's more hui to come. There's going to be one on the East Coast, one in Te Aroa and one in Ngaitahu. So, the resistance is gathering momentum, and just because Luxon is saying that it won't get past the first reading, I think, Māori remain sceptical and are still strategising about how to respond to the bill.
Yeah, well,
which is wise, I think.
Those select committee hearings are going to be fascinating. Christopher Luxon currently investigating whether he can do it under urgency, just have roll it all through in 40 hours.
Host the ultimate backyard barbecue with Whole Foods Market. It's the hot grill summer event through July 16th with sizzling sales on no antibiotics ever boneless beef ribeye steak and beef New York strip steak. Plus, check out sales on sustainable wild-caught Alaska sockeye salmon, organic strawberries, and more. In a hurry? Choose grab-and-go favorites like picnic salads and sushi, plus plenty of cooler-friendly beverages. Make it a hot grill summer at Whole Foods Market.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
There's a radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-Off or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's talk about the Casey Costello business.
She was there.
Was she?
She was there.
Oh,
yeah.
she was there. She joined the Waiata after Nicole McKee spoke, didn't she?
She did. She
Yeah.
joined, which I thought was interesting because she doesn't believe in the treaty, does she?
Well,
I think you can still do a Waiata, even if you don't
No,
believe in
I
the
just
treaty.
thought it was interesting that she came to Waitangi, given that she, it's really not her kaupapa. Like she's,
Well, no, she's
she kind of doesn't
believe it. She
yeah.
stops and speaks.
She's
They
actually
just
on the
don't-
ACT page of the, it's all about, because the Littlewood Treaty, the secret treaty that they found in a Manukau garage sale, that says that
That
actually it's
Hobson
all, we're all
actually, yeah.
together.
Yeah, yeah.
We're all together.
Actually, we did an interview with Shane Jones, and he was talking about the Kohimarama Treaty as well.
That's a separate one though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that's not related to the...
Everyone's bringing out their favourite, like old school.
I've got one too.
Yeah.
Publishing them in the newspaper. Didn't that group published the Apirana assessment of the treaty?
Yes.
And put the wrong URL. They put their own URL incorrectly in just about all of New Zealand's metropolitan newspapers, and someone put in an explainer on the treaty in that URL, so that if you looked at it. One of the other things that Luxon probably didn't expect or anticipate or seek was for a dominant narrative after the coalition agreement was signed to be smoking in New Zealand. That probably wasn't another thing that when he was, in his quiet hours leafing through his biographies of American presidents and other great leaders, thinking, what I hope to do is to stand and give my own Gettysburg address about smoking. That wasn't on the list. And yet, the winding back of some of the smoke-free provisions, a bunch of other things, some of which are trivial and not important, but kind of taken together in terms of attendance of lobbyists at signings and a bunch of other stuff have raised questions about whether or not the tobacco lobby is exerting an influence on the government, or more specifically its coalition partner. I was about to say treaty partner. There we go. Coalition partner, New Zealand First. This is one of the reasons that the business around Casey Costello, the New Zealand First minister, new MP, new minister, aforementioned, formerly Hobson's pledge, has come under greater scrutiny. I think Guy and Espiner has done reporting for RNZ relating to her correspondence with Ministry of Health officials. She's an associate Minister of Health.
With responsibility for smoke-free.
Well, yeah, for smoke-free.
For smoke-free.
Smoke-free.
Or smoking.
Or free smokes.
Free
Depending on who knows where this will end up. Who knows what post-it notes were attached to the manila folder. What about smokes being free? Remember when they were 10 cents ago? Now, correct me if I've got this wrong. I think that what happened is originally she said, no, I did not ask for specific advice on whether or not the excise increase. At the moment, excise continues pegged to inflation. So there have been a bunch of other ramping up of excise on tobacco over the years because it's a pretty easy political winner.
There
There's
were
a
some
health
very
argument.
high excise increases initiated by the Māori Party, which was about 10% per year
Right.
for about three years, and then another 3 years.
Right. So just let me finish this bit. So then that was included in a bunch of notes that went to the ministry, and it was reported that she'd asked for advice on whether or not to halt the excise increase on tobacco. She said, I did not ask for that. I did not ask for that specifically. Then it was revealed that there was written on the notes, remove excise tax. She said, I don't know who wrote that. And it transpired that it was just a bunch of documents that she'd handed over, including New Zealand First manifesto material. And really she had just handed some materials across. Looked bad. Ben, I know that you will think that there is a good argument not to increase the excise on tobacco. That's sort of a separate issue, isn't it,
Sure.
from the one here?
Sure.
Do you feel that Casey Costello would be reprimanded or treated differently were she a National Party junior minister rather than one attached to the New Zealand First Party?
I think with the level of sort of if she'd gone off her own bat as a National Minister of Health to ask about changes in the excise tax and then handed over a mysterious collation of texts, authors unknown.
Scrolls.
Yeah.
There might be a whole new Treaty of Waitangi in there too that the Ministry of Health officials are currently looking at.
I think it's, but people were asking her in Parliament, who was the author of this 5-page document of potential tobacco policies and talking points, and she said, I don't know who the authors are. And it's like, well, who wrote the Song of Solomon? who wrote the Book of Job?
Was Homer a single author or a collective?
Yeah, when you look at the New Zealand First Manifesto, if it can be compared to the Bible, and I think it can be,
yes.
Written approximately.
Some of it is first-hand accounts of people who have seen miracles performed by Winston Peters. So some of it is, people who have talked to people who were at remit meetings of the wider party membership. Some is simply the product of divine revelation. And some are more, in the nature of songs, poems, impressions, And to sort of say who wrote this? Who wrote this? Have these people ever done university English? The author is dead.
Outrageously literal.
Text comes from text. Sometimes that text is on the British American Tobacco website. but there are many different sources of text out there in the universe. Look, if she was a national minister, she would have been summoned to the 9th floor and she would have been absolutely bollocked. They wouldn't have sacked her this early, I don't think. But normally there is, you see a bit of a pattern with new governments, which is normally they can kind of ride out these controversies because they've sort of first blush kind of honeymoon year of popularity or something. Then somebody who's usually incompetent will mess up enough times or have some kind of attendance scandal, and that's within the first year. It'll usually happen 6 months to a year. And Richard Worth, Claire Curran, where the Prime Minister says, not good enough, I want higher standards for this government, they're gone. And then that gives you enough leeway to have ministers fucking up for the next 2 years because you've showed how tough you are and what high standards.
Right, well, it sets an example, it lays down the law.
But you can't, very, very difficult to do with your coalition partners because, look, the Minister of Police can't even go out and say, no, we can't actually recruit 500 police in the next 2 years.
It's not physically possible.
The Chief of Staff will get on the phone and say, that's not the policy.
Yeah.
The laws of physics and nature and the economy be damned. The policy is 2 years.
Yeah.
And I guess that's also the danger of having someone who's never been in Parliament at all so high on your party list, because then, they expect that if there's a coalition that they're going to get a portfolio, but they literally have, it's all brand spanking new to them. They haven't seen their mates getting roasted.
And this is normally the place where you'd say such a new minister would start looking to their more experienced, colleagues like Winston Peters or Shane Jones for some guidance on probity in the cabinet manual. Because I was actually thinking about this, right? Because there was this this minor kerfuffle because it turns out Luxon's sister-in-law works for BAT or Philip Morris, one of those ones. And he's declared that to the Cabinet Office because it is a potential conflict of interest, probably a pretty minor one, pretty easily managed, but the right thing to do is declare it. So he's done the right thing there. The people on social media outcry. They're like, this is terrible. This is awful. It's like, well, I guess, maybe so. Maybe he should step down and delegate all these decisions to his deputy, Winston Peters. And if Winston's out, he can give it to David Seymour, who's also supported the repeal of the smoke-free legislation. I don't know who's next on the list, Chris Bishop. The thing though is I actually don't think Costello's done anything that warrants being sacked or even.
No, but she would.
She's caused a distraction. She's caused a political problem.
This goes to the problem that Luxon faces, the problem of coalition government, perhaps. Jacinda Ardern faced plenty of it too, Annabelle, in that he can't stand up at Waitangi and say, this is only a nice thing for David Seymour to get the deal in. Obviously, we're not going to proceed with the bill. Don't be ridiculous. We're all cool. He can't say this. He can't haul Casey Costello into his office and say reprimand, say you need to apologise publicly, and then we'll move on. And that is a bind. That is a bind for Prime Minister and any, multi-headed, multi-tailed, whatever it is.
Do you think he ever gazes across the house at Marama Davidson and the Greens and goes, maybe I should have asked him, what would it have hurt if I'd said, here, have Ministry for, conservation, environment, carbon emissions. Yeah. I could have done that. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, if only
maybe they would have been a bit more chill.
Pluck out particular MPs. They probably would have.
What if there was a future co-leader of the Greens who had business experience, who knew her way around a balance sheet.
There we go.
Had been an entrepreneur, the kind of person that Chris Luxon wants to see, drive New Zealand into the future.
Been trying to scupper Chlöe Swarbrick's campaign for the Green leadership. It was going fine until then. Let's get on to that. James Shaw announced, whenever it was, a week ago or so, that he would be leaving the leadership of the Green Party, the co-leadership, and then he's going to skedaddle out of Parliament too. He's got a members' bill that he wants to get through, which is adding the right to a sustainable environment, I think, to the Bill of Rights Act.
Yeah, something like that.
Which sounds fun, and then he's out the door. And I think
with a beautiful movie quote, eh?
Oh yeah, we were talking about that before.
What would be his goodbye quote?
He at the karakia on the morning of Waitangi Day, he at the last moment, inspired by some of the earlier prayers that were read, ripped up his notes and went instead immediately to the IMDb page to find the quote that he wanted from the notebook, and said, "This quote is about two people, but it could equally be about two peoples." And he's sort of giddy with the dawn aromas. He read out this quite lovely passage from the film The Notebook about "Without you, I am nothing." It's kind of one of those amazing moments. Anyway,
I love that
sadly,
much.
sadly, that particular poet is departing, and he departs with a pretty impressive record, right? Like the Zero Carbon Act, as it is now, is a milestone bit of legislation in New Zealand Parliament. Not perfect, for sure, but his ability to get that through and to get support from the other side of the House. Todd Muller has written quite sweetly in praise of James Shaw. He wasn't always popular with elements within his own party. He was often misrepresented as being this kind of McKinsey type guy, and while he does have a background that is different to some of the activist base, perhaps the differences are overdrawn, I think. His contribution, Annabelle, overall, James Shaw?
I really feel that he came into his own over the last year. I thought he campaigned really, really well. I think he's a big loss. And I think that if I was to choose a quote for him, when he leaves Parliament, it'd be the end of Ghost.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd look at Marama and he'd say, "Marama, it's amazing. All the love, you take it with you."
Kia ora. I almost feel as though we should end the podcast here.
You can if you want.
Well, let's... Ben.
Yeah, look, James Shaw, very, the most impactful Green politician, probably.
Oh, really? Bigger than Matidia?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Well, Matidia's big achievement was admitting to benefit fraud and being sacked.
Oh my God, you're a jerk. What a jerk. That is bullshit. That's so mean.
That's unnecessary. Although, actually, interestingly enough, when Matidia stood for the Green co-leadership, she actually faced a lot of the same issues that Shaw did, because she was a former lawyer as well as an anarchist in McGillicuddy series and, what was it, lesbian feminist witch or something. But because she had been a corporate lawyer, no, this was a group that she was involved in. I don't know if that's the exact name, but it was something along those lines. And But because she'd been a corporate lawyer and because she wore a suit, she actually got all this flack from the membership that, you know, she was the acceptable corporate face of the Greens versus Sue Bradford, who she was running against, who was the real radical activist side of the Greens. So it is interesting how these things sort of morph over time and kind of shift. And that, no, look, I'm sorry, I was being flippant about Matiria. She was a very effective leader. And she almost got it exactly right, actually, on that welfare speech. It was just when more details emerged that trouble.
It's forgotten that part, actually. I was thinking about that when, you know, to shift the conversation to the whatever the new leader will be. That moment, it's often forgotten that without that speech, Jacinda Ardern almost certainly, it was highly unlikely that Jacinda Ardern would have been the Prime Minister after the election in 2017 because the Greens rose up, which knocked Little's Labour further down, which took them to, you know, the mid-20s. I think they were as low as 24 in one of the internal polls. And that was a consequence of Metiria Ture grabbing the public attention through putting herself out there in public, and then it went the other way around, and then she lost out. But it does show I think it does underscore the importance of leaders in these things.
And the Greens do, you know, people said, oh, sure, helped increase their vote. I don't think the data actually bears that out. The thing is the Greens have a base of around 5, and then they go up and down between sort of 5 and I think sometimes they get as high as 13. And it's usually counter-cyclical to how Labour is doing at the time, or with a few sort of variations. But normally weak Labour means strong Greens. They have a real chance, I think, as a number of people have noted, including me in my column for Stuff last week, that the Greens have a huge opportunity, I think, to seize the momentum as the sort of true, you know, the leaders of the opposition, the unofficial leadership. Chlöe Swarbrick has the kind of, and I don't want to say the appeal, but the skill set, I think, to really kind of seize that, in that she is, you know, a genuine sort of policy person. She's across policy, you know, from the Greens' own interests, you know, climate, treaty, social issues, but also government fiscals, economics. She's very strong on that as well. Climate, obviously. She is almost a sort of throwback to another era. She doesn't kind of talk in these sort of bullet point talking points. She's sort of articulate enough and believes in herself and probably the electorate enough that she actually tries to convince people in full sentences.
Right.
Like
That's a very good point. It's kind of a bit of a sorry state that should seem old-fashioned, but it does. Not that old-fashioned. It's sort of, you know, it's the kind of thing that even a Tony Blair used to do. I mean, he had his talking points, but the idea was you go out there and you make a case. And I think that both for David Seymour and for Chlöe Swarbrick, who became, in his case, the stated advocate of the end-of-life choice bill, in her case became the, almost by default, the de facto spokesperson for the cannabis legalisation referendum, that's what you do in those circumstances. You can't just deliver talking points to try and get through to the next thing that are consistent with whatever your spin doctor has provided to you. You have to go out there and make a case, and she does that probably as well as or better than anybody else in Parliament in terms of going on. That's why she's very popular on TV too. You know,
absolutely.
She can do it snappily, articulately, but with a knowledge of the back part of it. So that on, for example, drug reform, if someone comes at her with a talking point, she can unpick that and explain
the Belgian study of whatever.
Sure,
And I think that makes her a much more attractive proposition for the media and the public in terms of leading the charge against the government. You know, if you need quick reaction talking points, you're probably better served going to a Chlöe Swarbrick than a Chris Hipkins, for instance. You know, Chris Hipkins, aside from parts of the Labour base, he didn't really excite anyone as Prime Minister or as Labour Party leader until that last week of the campaign. So, you know, I think there's a real opportunity. On the other hand, as devil's advocate here, because I've just been a big kind of Chlöe fanboy,
You've been a Chlöe fanboy for a long time,
He's
to
a
be fair.
massive Chlöe fanboy, this guy.
But also let's look at a different option, which is the Greens are conducting these under their new leadership rules, right? So previously the Greens had this sort of antediluvian, bigoted system where they would have a male co-leader and a female co-leader, right?
Yes.
A regressive reactionary hierarchy. They changed those rules a little while ago to say that one of the two co-leaders, they would have two co-leaders, one co-leader had to have Māori whakapapa and one co-leader had to be female, right?
Yeah.
Now, Marama covers both of those boxes, so both of those criteria. So they have enormous...
She's like when you win lotto and the next bit, the strike.
Go on, who are you making a play for?
So there's
it
enormous
out there.
flexibility.
Yeah.
Well,
Who do you
I've
want?
got 11 words for you.
Go.
Ain't no rule that says a dog can't be co-leader.
What dog?
Well, like kind of the Air Bud stratagem, right? You get it wouldn't be a kind of golden.
Is this the two-tailed dog?
It wouldn't
What
be
is
like a
going
golden
on?
retriever that plays basketball, though. It'd probably be like a native bird, some kind of skink or gecko.
This is turning into reality check radio at this point.
Okay.
It would have to be a kuri because that
Whanganui
is
River
the...
to Urewera Mountain Range and Mount Taranaki, all natural features that have legal personhood and could be Greens co-leader in a second if the Greens tried to approach them.
Tuhoi would never agree to it. Never.
Well, what about a river? Why did you? What about a river?
Yeah, Whanganui River.
Okay.
Yeah.
I should just say, to catch people up who haven't been paying attention, that Chlöe Swarbrick announced her candidacy for the Green co-leadership, which will be voted on by, I guess, delegates in March. I think the deadline is, mid-February. So there may be more. As best I'm aware, there have been no other nominations at this time, but there are some other people. I don't know that Julian Gent has ruled it out. Tiano Tiono is another possibility. He's so it's not a done deal. But what do you think, Annabelle, in terms of the potential for Chlöe Swarbrick to, I guess, move the dial? I guess as traversed, start going for that party of opposition. We've seen ACT do it sometimes. We saw Meteria and Russell Norman do it sometimes, kind of start to look like the lead party of opposition. Is there potential for that with a Swarbrick, Davidson co-leadership?
She's a master of the politics of persuasion, isn't she? And I think the more that she is platformed, which obviously you get a lot more of when you're in leadership, you're a lot more visible, then that can only be good for the party. I think it's smart in terms of securing Auckland Central and showing the Greens' commitment to that seat, because electorates like the idea of having a leader representing them. She seems the obvious choice. When you think about it too, like she often is paired up against David Seymour when it comes to television interviews and stuff, and he's 11 years older than her. She's been doing it since her early 20s. Like, she's a tough cookie, and I think, to me, if it's about encouraging younger voters, all of that sort of stuff, then you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find someone better than her.
Right, that's us, I think. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you, Tiahe. Thank you, listeners. Thank you to the Whanganui River. And all dogs with many tails. We will return anon. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
This is Climate Adaptation.
We are the Pōtiki of the Taiao.
And the words of those keeping the home fires burning.
It's more than just going along and planting some trees. You got to be able to defend that place to the end of your life.
We have the solutions. We just need to come back to the belief in ourselves as rangatira.
Join me, Nadine Hura, and Ruia Āpirehama, for Ko Papa Ko Rangi Series 2, Ahi Ka. Brought to you by Te Komata o Te Tonga, the Deep South Challenge, out now on the Spin-Off Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.